We're in the camp. The riflemen stayed here where we're walking. But you can't tell anymore. We can't see the infrastructure. Here we created hospitals, schools, roads. We removed everything. I would have liked a statue to be built in Thiaroye.
Yes.
That could remind us of history.
A statue of what? A rifleman?
Yes, a rifleman. Why not? Thiaroye should be a place of pilgrimage.
For memory. Yes, for memory, for remembrance.
Every time people come here to commemorate our grandfathers who we buried here. But where exactly? That's the problem. Where? We know that they're here in this land, but where exactly? We wonder, when they built this highway, if they didn't find any bones. I don't know. This is the exact place. According to the story, this would be the place where the riflemen were buried. Right over there.
Military domain.
élection sama kono yaa fi di koon te di koon ñu dëkk bu émergent assuré futur jeunes yi dëkk bu liggéey am corruption du fi maanaam yoon am ñun jug nañ fajar mbëggante si bus yi wuti liggéey gisuñu dara jàppuñ si dara defuñ laamu dëgër der bi fi indi financé wul dara ter bi taat ne tool te BRT bi xoj na suñu kon
I need a break. You're going to kill me.
Do you want some cold water?
Yeah.
2 minutes and then?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, then we'll do it without the mic.
He's the coach.
A soldier. He's going to kill me.
Here.
Thanks.
Here, there were quite a few of them. They didn't even know how to use a weapon because, well, they didn't even think that they were going to become a soldier or someone who went to war.
Yes, but it did depend on the period. There were times when they really received military training.
Yes, later they were trained.
Especially at the beginning, in fact. Especially at the beginning of the rifleman period.
There are people who say that the word used for riflemen, tirailleurs, came from there. It means shoot elsewhere. They gave them weapons and told them to shoot elsewhere, but not to shoot at them. Shoot at the whites, shoot at the French, the Germans, shoot elsewhere.
Hunter or soldier who shoots badly or in disorder.
That's it.
So they didn't master shooting.
À Dakar, l'entraînement des troupes noires se poursuit avec méthode. Il est émouvant de lire sur le visage de ces hommes le même calme et la même résolution qui animaient déjà leurs aînés, glorieux combattants de 1914. Et c'est en portant leur barda à la mode du pays que les nouvelles troupes gagnent les navires qui les transporteront en France, où courageusement ils rempliront leurs devoirs aux côtés des troupes métropolitaines. Animés du plus bel esprit de sacrifice, les hommes de nos colonies ont répondu d'un élan unanime à l'appel de la mère patrie.
My name is Aisha. I spent a large part of my childhood in Thiaroye, and I wrote a play about the story of the Thiaroye massacre. I'm very, very honored to be here today and to be able to listen to you.
So I'm Maggie. I'm an artist, singer, rapper, and activist.
My name is Babacar. I live in the area of Thiaroye Station. I'm a comedian, screenwriter, and actor. We're very happy to meet you.
I'm the son of Mbab Senghor, who, like his comrades, was a victim of the Thiaroye massacre on December 1st, 1944. I remember it because on the day of the funeral, people came to our house. I asked my grandmother, that's to say my father's mother, what's going on? She said to me, it's your dad who died. They asked my family for information. At that time, I was in my last year at primary school. When the military leader came out, I leaned over his table and saw that my father, Mbab Senghor, had the number 32,124. So I wrote it down.
32,124.
32,124.
After the announcement of your father's death, did your family try to find his body?
We couldn't do anything because it was a mass crime. He was killed with his comrades in Thiaroye, and they were buried in the camp in a mass grave. We couldn't do anything. They just brought us back a suitcase and a piece of paper stained with blood.
Before joining the infantry, was your father in the army, or did he volunteer when the war broke out?
He didn't volunteer. People weren't willing at all. They didn't volunteer to go to war. No, they were enlisted by force. They left to help France, but France forgot that in 1944. People who went to the front lines, who came back, who only wanted to go home, they were massacred because they dared to ask for their bonuses. How cowardly. France even refuses to recognize the crime, saying that they didn't die for France, but it was the French who killed them.
Do you do anything on December 1st, every December 1st?
Every month of Ramadan, or every time I go to Dakar, I go there to say prayers.
In the cemetery, the military cemetery?
In the cemetery, yes, but I admit, I don't know. I've seen graves there, but others say they're in a mass grave.
Bodies were scattered underground in Thiaroye, but we don't know where exactly.
We know that. They tell stories.
Do they know that?
They know very well that the mass graves are somewhere.
But they don't want to tell the truth.
Is everything okay, Professor? There he is here for you. Ask your questions and he'll answer.
In fact, this military cemetery was built during the First World War. At the beginning of the 20th century, we have the military camp, which is about 1 kilometer away. which is the largest military camp in West Africa, where all the riflemen who came from French Sudan, so present-day Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, etc., were gathered in Senegal. It was from the Thiaroye camp and then the Dakar camp that they embarked. They embarked for France during the First World War and during the Second World War. There are about 200,000 Africans who are gathered in France who will be defeated with the French army in 1940, and the riflemen that we will find in Thiaroye later are riflemen who were prisoners of war during 4 years, from the fall of 1940 to the fall of 1944.
Do we know how much they should have earned?
We are in fact talking about the money they should have earned during their captivity. Despite the fact that they were prisoners between 1940 and 1944, they had a payment each day, which is written in notebooks. And it is this sum which at the time of their discharge was to be paid to them and which was not paid.
Did the French kill them, so they stopped asking for their money?
What is always complicated, in fact, in history, is that we have to work from the sources we have. And the sources we have are the documents of those who killed them. The French army will portray it as a mutiny and therefore say it's the fault of the riflemen. The army then identifies rebels, mutineers as it calls them, and it will submit those 48 riflemen for judgment.
The events that took place here in December 1944 are quite simply appalling, unbearable. And France is greater when it can look into its past with lucidity. France is not itself when it refuses to look into events that tarnished its image. I wanted to repair an injustice and pay tribute to the memory of men who wore the French uniform and against who the French turned their guns. Because that is what happened. It was the bloody repression of Thiaroye.
So François Hollande in his speech uses the word, the expression of bloody repression. It seems to me that this is not the fairest term one could use for what happened. But you still have to acknowledge that Hollande did this speech, made this gesture, came here, and when he says bloody repression, it is a way of saying that in the end they were repressed because they had done something. It is saying that perhaps the repression is excessive. It is surely excessive, but it can be understood. I think the term is not right to speak of what I call a mass crime. We are not in an act of war, in an act of combat. At the same time, we're in a period of war, so we can say that it is a war crime? Well, I think these are questions that are, well, here we are, questions of history.
Perhaps using these words would be shocking, especially in relation to Africans. If they said they had committed a mass crime against our ancestors, that would have awakened something in young people.
It's quite surprising how he changes he actually reverses the story. He does a kind of turnaround.
Exactly, yes.
He doesn't say mutiny. He doesn't say that he doesn't really use this term. He says that they were accused of. Instead, he uses euphemisms.
He reverses the mistake in a rather subtle way, but in the end he doesn't say it's mutineers, he says finally it's them. It's understandable and they gathered, which is really false in fact. Factually, they did not gather. They were rounded up and executed.
Yeah, ces hommes se sont battus pour ta liberté. Ces hommes, frères d'armes, des blancs déjà payés. Ces hommes réclament leur dû avant le camp levé. Ces hommes, des tirailleurs lâchement exterminés. Sans défense désarmés au service de l'armée française. Assassinés, mitraillés, puis enterrés dans des fossés. 3 par 3, 4 par 4, vous les avez enterrés. Puis vous mentez en disant qu'ils se sont rebellés. C'est un crime contre l'humanité. Commis pour la France, assumez vos responsabilités.
Something like that?
Un truc comme la 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 la.
Then we say,
Thiaroye, tu dépasses. Thiaroye, tu... C'était ça, on Thiaroye, tu dépasses, tu m'attrapes dans ma tête, tu résonnes. Ta revendication dépasse, tu portes la résistance. Thiaroye, tu dépasses, tu m'attrapes dans ma tête, tu résonnes. Ta revendication dépasse, tu portes la résistance.
I'm just going to fix the ending, here, from here. It's a crime against humanity committed by France. Assume your responsibility. It's not limited to recognition. As Emmanuel recognized, no.
François Hollande.
François Hollande, yes.
Doudou Diallo is a Senegalese. He was born in 1918, so he's 26. He's someone who is, like most, he's someone who is in his 20s, who's quite young.
He was killed?
Doudou Diallo?
Yes.
No. He's not at the camp on November 30th. He's with his sister in Dakar, and there on December 1st, he comes back. He's arrested. He's considered a leader of the rebellion when in fact he was not there. He wasn't there the night before. He was brought to France in 1940. He was first taken prisoner in the Vosges, and then he was taken prisoner at the Marne camp in Rennes. And moreover, he was with Mbap Senghor at this time, and they were prisoners together. It was one of the largest colonial prison camps at that time. Germany didn't want blacks on German soil, frankly, because they were afraid of diseases, they were afraid of contamination, they were afraid of contact with the German population. There is still a daily life in the camps. They work, they have parcels from the Red Cross, which tries to help them a little, and there are many stories of life there. In particular, we have Doudou Diallo in this photo with a little girl called Maïté, who he had in fact with a volunteer, I presume, who works in the prison camp. He works for the Germans, but from 1944 he began to help resistance networks outside of the camp. So there are also many riflemen in these camps who will manage to escape and who will either join the resistance a little later or other networks and who will participate in the fight against the German occupier in France at that time. In the fall of 1944, the prisoners of war who were scattered all over French territory began to be gathered together to be repatriated. And there's an administrative directive which was enacted a little before and which says that the payment must be made. A quarter paid on boarding in Morlaix, in Brittany, and 3/4 in Africa upon arrival. Still, there are certain riflemen who won't believe this promise, who will start demanding their money at that time, all of their money that is due to them, and who don't believe they're going to be paid once they arrive in Dakar, and who aren't going to board. There are about 315 riflemen who refuse to board.
Maybe it was just a promise to get them out of their territory.
tubaab bi nax na ma wan ñëpp gannaaw ngir ñëw feral say rangooñ dimbali la suturaal la sigil la ci kanamu àdduna yépp ba ñu naw la gën laa jox sa gëdd amuloo lenn loo may fayee lu dul di ma war ray ma gas ma suul xañ ma sama njaboot xañ ma samay xarit ak samay àndandoo lii duma la ko baal duma la ko baal duma la ko baal
Dakar, grand port français, plaque tournante de l'Atlantique Sud. Clé de la route du Cap. Ce port que l'Angleterre voulait s'approprier a été défendu victorieusement par nos marins, nos aviateurs et nos soldats. Au centre de ce jardin, la place frottait avec le monument aux morts de la guerre 1914-1918. Et voici le palais du gouverneur général de l'AOF. C'est de là qu'est parti l'ordre de résistance. C'est là que fut conçue la réponse cinglante à l'ultimatum britannique. À une fenêtre de ce palais, voici le gouverneur général Poisson contemplant la ville qu'il a su conserver à la France. Dans cette école indigène, ces petits noirs continueront à étudier le français. Protégés par ceux qui ont su les défendre, ils apprendront chaque jour à mieux connaître la France nouvelle et celui qui en est le chef.
We had a Vichy regime in Dakar in 1940. Most officers collaborated with the German occupation government. And indeed, it is also the case with the officers in Thiaroye in 44. The colonial riflemen, the African soldiers, are not in their priorities. They are within their colonial stereotypes. And then we will say it again. The French officers present in Dakar were far from the front line compared to the African soldiers of that time.
aux soldats africains de cette époque. Le 27.
On November 27, 1944, there is a first convoy of riflemen which must leave for Bamako. And in fact, some refuse to go. The next day, General Dagnan, who manages the Senegal-Mauritania zone, arrives and explains that the riflemen were in disorder, that he was nearly taken hostage. Only he says that. It's a way of saying, in fact, the military detachment was in a state of rebellion, mutiny, etc. And so I was forced to mobilize a force of repression. And he's going to bring out this order number 1, which is here. It says, measures are being taken to restore order in this military detachment, while avoiding as much as possible, and that's important, as much as possible. It's a way of covering themselves, of making use of arms. He ends this passage by saying, I quote, that it is a matter of squashing quickly and by surprise the camp of Thiaroye in order to prevent any escape of the riflemen, in order to restore order to the detachment, and to show such superiority that the mutineers cannot think of resisting, that the affair is carried out without a problem.
Squashing.
Hang on, so squashing quickly.
Squashing, yes. Squashing quickly and by surprise clearly means that there will be no more space for discussion, negotiations, anything. It is a question of encircling them, of also making sure that the affair is carried out. The affair, in quotation marks, in a closed space. Let no one witness this.
Yeah, in an enclosed space. There's something I don't understand here. If the money's in Dakar, their money, everything France owes them, why don't they just give it to them? I don't understand. Where's the problem? What do they do with that money? Where did that money go?
No one understands that. No one understands why.
Where's the problem? They claim their rights, they claim their money, the money's there. Why don't they just give it to them?
A lot of people said that from the time. There was no need to carry out this crackdown. It was enough to pay the riflemen. The money was there. It was enough to settle what we owed them. And indeed, they seemed to want to get rid of it as soon as possible. And maybe embezzlement. There you go. It's also a very plausible hypothesis, which I cannot confirm. But in any case, it's a working hypothesis. And it always happens that way.
Et toujours est-il que, bon, ça se passe comme ça.
This is no small force. We are really talking about weapons of war.
It's tanks, armored vehicles.
Yes, there are tanks with treads.
What we see in the movies.
There are armored cars and then half-tracks. That's tanks that have been installed with machine guns. In any case, we feel that it's not very good and that they're not looking to calm the situation. That it's about
a show of force.
It means that there were things brewing. It was actually brewing. And they were talking with the coded language. The case must go smoothly. But what?
On November 30th, we have this telegram which comes from Dakar, which is in fact a way of putting Paris in front of a done deal. It says, I am taking steps to prevent, if necessary, by force the worsening of the situation and to restore authority and prestige.
There was no response from Paris?
In any case, the response is unavailable. I don't know if these are things that have been removed from the archives. The fact that it happens there at 1 o'clock in the morning and that the operation begins at 5 o'clock in the morning the same day, we wonder maybe they were sleeping in the offices in Paris.
So, in that case, why am I hearing a lot that de Gaulle was aware of it?
It's true, that's a question that I've asked myself, that many historians ask themselves. Did de Gaulle give an order?
That would make sense.
It's a gray area. What is certain is that de Gaulle did nothing with regard to the riflemen who were imprisoned afterwards. And everything that followed will show that it is indeed a question of keeping the colonies under the control of the French authorities, and at any cost, in fact, and at the cost of victims, at the cost of massacres, etc. It makes me very happy to see you again. It's always an honor, and I know all the background you have, that you entered the army in 1947, I think?
1947, yes. I was 28.
December 47, yes, yes.
Et moi, j'avais une question.
And I had a question about December 1st, 1944. Because we already talked a bit about that at the time, what happened in Thiaroye.
Thiaroye. I was on holidays. On the way back, we took the train at the Dakar station to go back to school. When we arrived in Thiaroye, there were soldiers stopping the train. The station master told us, the train cannot leave because there is a situation in the camp over there. We were kids. We didn't know, but suddenly we heard gunshots. Everybody was screaming. Everybody was saying, "What's the matter? What's happening?" There are white soldiers shooting at the men who had returned from war. That's how we knew that they were shooting at our riflemen brothers.
Did you hear the shots?
From the station, we could clearly hear the gunshots.
Definitely, yes.
Definitely. It was not far, Thiaroye station and the camp. We said to ourselves, but what's going on? Is this the war? It was after we were told that these soldiers, they were only claiming what they were due. The payments that they were owed to them during the war. In order not to give them that, they were killed. It's like what they did to us here. It's not normal. I apologize for the term, for telling you this, but France is ungrateful. How many veterans died in misery? When you see a French friend in France who has 3 or 4 times what you have, that's not normal. It's not normal. Friends with whom you have traveled everywhere. You've been to Indochina. Indochina. I've made 2 stays in Indochina. I finished afterwards in Algeria. Why? Martin, I'm not saying this to blame you, but France did not pay Africa. And yet we, the young Africans, we loved France. We loved France. We joined the army because we believed that races did not exist in the army. On the contrary, almost all of the officers were racists. How many times have I been punished because I was outspoken? I was a revolutionary. Even on my documents it was marked revolutionary. Cannot make an officer, nor a non-commissioned officer. Because I'm proud of my skin. I'm proud of this skin. I'm proud of my skin.
Dans le son, si on pouvait avoir un truc comme genre, ça sonne un peu militaire là, je le sens. Yeah, ouais. Yeah, il faut mettre ça en valeur. Avec un pièce, un truc qui marque ça.
C'est un crime de masse commis par la France. Assumez votre responsabilité car il est temps.
Quoi? Mais responsabilité, ça veut dire gën see nekk.
Ah?
Gën see nekk quoi?
Assumez votre responsabilité car il est temps.
Non, assumez votre responsabilité.
Responsabilité, il est temps.
Voilà, c'est ça.
Assumez vos responsabilités, il est temps. Let's go. C'est un crime de masse commis par la France. Assumez vos responsabilités, il est temps.
Yeah, tu veux commencer?
Perfect.
That's good.
So on December 1st, in the morning, from 5 to 6 a.m., they are gathered on a specific esplanade. And it is from there that they will shoot at these men who are unarmed. And from there, the big question, too, is the number of victims. The number. And there we come to the heart of the government's lie, if we can say so. I had my first doubts after reading the Dagnan report. It is in two copies which say two different things to two authorities. One report says of the mutineers, there are 24 killed, 46 wounded and transported to the hospital in Dakar, and 11 of whom died afterwards. So we have 11 dead plus the 24. We arrive at 35. In the other report, we're told of the mutineers 24 killed, 46 wounded transported to Dakar Hospital, and subsequently died.
46 plus 24.
46 plus 24, 70. And there, in fact, for me, it was one of the most incriminating things to say. Why are you telling us 35 here and you're telling us 70 here? They say 46, of which 11, or 46 subsequently died. It's a bit subtle, but we can tell ourselves that here it is. He does it in a relatively skillful way, and that it's not the only document. That's what's important, too. There are plenty of documents where you say to yourself, but that's not normal. Why does it say this?
Comparing the two documents, we see that they have an identical point. That's to say, the one wounded by bullet at the level of the order service. I say to myself, how on a place where it's said that there was a rebellion, that there was resistance between two black riflemen, how can we kill all the resistance fighters but only one at the level of the security service is injured? So I tell myself that that may contradict the fact that there was a rebellion.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. If we think that the riflemen were armed, we can imagine that they would have actually fought, that they weren't going to let themselves be killed like that.
Yes, that they were going to kill several of them, so...
Of course. In addition, we say one wounded by bullet, but then we're going to do an expert report. Ballistic experts will show from the bullet wound that the victim was injured by those from the security service, and that it was a bullet that ricocheted somewhere and that it hit him. And by looking at the various documents, we realize that there is a kind of fundamental contradiction, which leads us to think that the massacre would perhaps be of the order of 300 to 400 riflemen. So that is to say 10 times more than 35. We're going to have this document here from General Security, which tells us about a stopover that took place in Casablanca. So the boat between Brittany and Dakar stops in Casablanca, and there we are told, at the time around 400 refused to leave and stayed in Casablanca. And in fact, the officer who accompanied the riflemen on the boat said, during the stopover in Casablanca, there was nothing to report during the 24 hours at the Medounia camp. That, for me, it goes a little unnoticed, but it's really the decisive element that tells us, well, you are lying. Either there are 400 who get off at Casablanca and who don't return. Already we don't understand. Or everything goes well, and in this case, potentially, there are many more riflemen who will land in Dakar on November 21st. They absolutely wanted to reduce the number of riflemen present in the camp, and if they reduced them, it is for a very simple reason. It is to reduce the number of victims.
About the number of victims, how can you bury 400 bodies between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock or noon? I don't know. It's huge. 400. It's...
No. So that's the question that comes after the counting of victims. It's where would the bodies be? We don't know why the military authorities did not tell their superiors. What do we do next? It is something that makes us think that here we are that there's something to hide, at whatever level, in fact. It's not easy to answer this question of, did we not want to write these documents? Did we not want to send them to the archives or to the services that will archive them afterwards? Were they written down and then at some point we destroy these documents, which would give us a list of riflemen who landed in Dakar, a list of riflemen killed afterwards? So these people who had a name, who had an identity, a face, and then overnight, we don't know anymore. They become anonymous victims, just like that.
Get up after saying too long. For too long, we've drowned our pain in silence. Enough. Too long. Too long, we've drowned our pain in silence. Enough.
Le silence.
Le silence. Le silence du cimetière de Thiaroye vous appelle sans cesse par ses bouches muettes. Des tombes vides de ceux qui n'y sont pas. De ceux qui réclament leur sépulture. De ceux dont leurs corps sont éparpillés quelque part sur cette terre rougie de leur sang.
Get up.
Nous avons noyé notre mal dans le silence. Assez. Aujourd'hui, nous réclamons.
Get up. Hold out your hands.
Nous réclamons au moins des funérailles dignes de leur sacrifice. Nous réclamons que l'histoire dévoile sa vraie vie. Nous réclamons de faire
We demand that history reveals all its truth.
Nous réclamons de faire le deuil de ces tirailleurs massacrés, la réhabilitation de leur dignité bafouée et celle de leurs frères emprisonnés et condamnés.
Thank you, that's good.
Do you feel okay? Good. You can open your eyes. Look at me. Let's go. It's the character of Mamadou. It's true that we haven't talked about him. He was a rifleman from the security service, you see, who wasn't called up, who didn't go to Europe. He was there on the spot, and he saw what happened. He couldn't do anything. And then he became a guard. He stayed and he carried this guilt all his life of not being able to do anything, of being there. And for all his life, he talks to the dead every night. That's to say, he's old. His whole trajectory is a descent, and he ends up joining them, in fact. He ends up joining the space where these dead men are. But in this play, they're neither dead nor alive. They're in a kind of limbo, what I call on the sidelines. In a space where, as they haven't received a burial, they stay there, in fact. They stay there. He's joining them little by little, you see.
Can the uprising exasperate the dawn? But tell me, can the uprising exasperate the dawn?
Look at me. Go, go, go.
Can the uprising exasperate the dawn?
Go.
Can the uprising exasperate the dawn?
Don't stop, don't stop. Who cares, who cares? Don't stop, go ahead.
Can the uprising exasperate the dawn?
Le soulèvement peut-il exaspérer l'aube?
Come back, my brothers. Come back. Come back tonight. Come back tonight. Come back here. One after the other, pray at night. Stay away and face their fear. This skin in front of theirs. Tonight, I'm just an old man. Alone. Sitting in this empty cemetery. The graves are empty, but your bodies are there. My brothers under this earth. My skin covers your bodies.
In fact, here it is. We're going from a state crime to a kind of crime on paper, if we can say so. How will the authorities start to make up leaders, culprits, and fabricate evidence to indict these riflemen and say that it is they who, in fact, committed the acts that they should not have committed? We're going to arrest 48 ringleaders. Still, there you go, in quotes. So 48 riflemen that we are going to designate. In the end, we will only judge 34. And that is something we have no information about. What happens between 48 and 34? What happens to the 14? We don't know. We have this investigation which lasts for a month until December 29th. And we have this trial, in fact. So in any case, the word of the rifleman is never heard. There are even things that are really quite absurd. First, they will say that the riflemen had photos of Hitler with them, except the photos will never be shown. They will say the riflemen are influenced by the communists. Well, either way, they are pro-German or they are pro-communism, but they cannot be both at the same time. In fact, these officers, in addition to being killers, in addition to being racists, they're also misogynists. They're also completely misogynistic. And they finally say that it's these women volunteers with whom the riflemen had relations, who put bad ideas in their heads, or in any case, who made them realize that they had the right to claim money, and it's ultimately the fault of these white women. Military justice is really a denial of justice. It's really, anyway, the fate of these riflemen is decided from that moment. From the beginning of December, we set in motion this machination, this legal machination. Their fate is sealed, we will say.
I do not recognize the charges against me.
I don't recognize that I found myself among armed riflemen. I didn't have a knife myself.
I deny having said we must kill all the white people.
Colonization is nothing but armed robbery. It's theft, imperialism. The imperialists are thieves. They're robbers. This small event in the suburbs of Dakar is revealing. This crime is the harbinger of a sequence that will happen almost every year. Thiaroye in 44, Sétif and Gelmo in 45, 50,000 dead. Hanoi and Haiphong in 46. They go to reconquer Indochina. Madagascar in 47. 100,000 dead. Dimbokro, Benjaville, Korogo. In Ivory Coast in 48. Because the GDR was formed and Cameroon from 49 onwards.
Le jour où la vérité sur Thiaroye,
the day when the truth about Thiaroye comes to light completely, will be a radioactive explosion.
comme déflagration. Mais nous,
But we are not counting on the goodwill of the French administration or justice system. We're counting on our own battles that Africans must fight at home for themselves. And for that, for example, on the number of victims, we, my party, which has a deputy in the National Assembly, wrote to the Prime Minister of Senegal to ask for the opening of mass graves, the exhumation of bodies. If we open the mass graves, we could count the number of skulls, because there's only one skull per body, and we would know if they were in the order of 10 or in the order of 100. There'll be no more debate. If we're given the archives, but these are nominative lists, so all the debates around Thiaroye are ultimately false debates, since we have the means to know the real truth. Just let it come out instead of hiding it.
Et puis d'assumer son histoire.
It is only a matter of time. Through education, through training, through information, and through example. Sooner or later, the truth will eventually prevail. And at that moment, sincere and real reconciliation becomes possible.
Et définitive devient possible.
Thiaroye 44, an unforgettable story.
Ces hommes se sont battus pour votre liberté. Ces hommes, frères d'armes, des blancs déjà payés. Ces hommes réclament leur dû avant le camp levé. Ces hommes, ces tirailleurs lâchement exterminés, sans défense, désarmés au service de l'armée française, assassinés, mitraillés et jetés dans des fossés. 3 par 3, 4 par 4, vous les avez enterrés. Puis vous mentez en disant qu'ils se sont rebellés. C'est un crime de masse commis par la France. Assumez vos responsabilités, il est temps. C'est un crime de masse commis par la France. Assumez vos responsabilités, il est temps.